messed up a little. Oh, okay. Okay. Hi. So this is Kelly. I'm going to be talking about Git on the command line today. So first of all, what is Git? It's a version control system, which basically means it allows you to track the changes in your source code, and it's designed for programmers to coordinate their work. And it's it's the most widely used modern version control system in the world today. So how to get started with Git? We should all have Git on our laptops already, since in our CodeFlix project, one of the requirements was to install Git. And so for what we've done so far is we've used a module called Create React App, which already automatically initiates your project as a Git project, which is why you can do all the things like Git commit, Git add, Git push in your VS Code. So if you're doing something that isn't by using the Create React App module, what you do is create your project directory, initialize it with Git by running git commit. Oh, I can't say the words right now. By running Git init, and then you can run Git commands in your project in terminal. So if I just do that very quickly. So I want to make a directory called, let's just say test1 for now. And then if I go into test1, if I try to run anything right now, that's a Git command, it's not going to work. So fatal, not a Git repository or any of the parent directories. So what I want to do is make it a Git repository. So now it says initialized. So now if I try to run a Git command, it works. So it says you're on the branch master, no commits yet. So now I can basically do commands in here. So that's just an example for if you're creating something, not automatically initiating it as Git. So keep in mind that you can use Git with anything. It doesn't have to be a JavaScript project. It can be like a Python project or whatever languages are out there. So next, if we talk about Git branching. So branching is something that we've already come across in our CodeFlix project. And in our team apps, so far, we've been doing forking. So it's kind of the same concept, but branching is more so for when you've cloned the master source code. So typically in a company, the master branch will be the code that is live or in production. So whatever is in the master branch is going to reflect what the customer sees or the end user sees in their device. So this baseline here is a master branch, and say your team want to implement a feature and you've called your branch call this feature. So you take your branch off of master at this point, you start making commits and you start pushing and committing and pushing to your branch and make sure this actually is your branch, because I've done it in the master before by accident. And then as that's happening, someone else has taken a branch off of the master as well, and they're working on something and they've called their branch call feature, and they're also committing and pushing into their branch. So just a quick question for everyone, just to check that everyone's on the same level right now. If you're making branches, or if you've made your branch and you've committed and pushed to your branch, do these changes come up into master, for example?
No.
Yeah, that's correct. So it doesn't show up in master, it's independent from master. And same thing for whoever branch this is, their changes won't come in your branch and your changes won't come up in their branch. So everything is independent right now. So say, now you're ready to merge into your master, you've done the whole pull request, code review, all of that stuff, and it's gone into master. And now at this stage, your changes have now been merged into master, so master contains your changes. And now this is sort of like the new version of master. So if someone that's using this branch now tries to merge into master at a different point, so after you've merged all your changes in there, do you think there's going to be any changes or any conflicts while they're trying to merge into master? Will they come across any problems?
If there's been changes that they've been trying to make to a file that's also been edited, or whatever branch goes.
Yeah, so like Jack said, there might be some conflicts. So at this point, keep in mind that they haven't pulled everything that's come from master, so they're going to have to pull everything so that they're up to date, is the phrase that they use. And then from there, if there's any conflicts, you fix them. So either you pull the changes that are coming in and then you add yours on top, or whatever it is you need to do, and then you can merge into master. But before that, obviously, all the code review has to happen. So all of that, just put into some steps is, so number 1, take a branch off the master. 2, make your changes on this branch, commit and push this branch, which is what I'm going to cover next. And then create your pull requests. You may need to pull master and merge conflicts / your branch is out of date. And then code review, merge into master, and now master branch has your changes. So this is typically the workflow if you're working with branches. So if we cover now committing and pushing, so this is what I like to call the holy grail of using Git. These are the commands that you're mostly going to be using on a day-to-day basis. So git status checks unstaged files or the files that you've made changes to. Git add, and what you do next depends on what you're adding. So git add dot adds all the unstaged files, and then git add on the name of the file adds the specific file that you've specified. Then git commit -m, and then in quotes whatever the message is that you want to go with that commit, and git push. So before you do all of this, make sure that you're actually on the branch that you want to push to instead of the master. So if I just demo that really quickly, I've created a repository already called git demo, currently on the master branch. And now I want to create a branch called, let's just kind of do the same as this. So I'm going to call it cool feature. So we're still in master, so what we need to do is get checkout, which checks out into the branch that we want to go into, cool feature. Right, okay, so now we're in the cool feature branch. Let's make some changes. So let's change this and say something like, this is the cool feature. And let's put it in the header. Oh no, what did I do? So if I try to run it just to show what's happening, which you can basically tell what's happening. Gonna wait for that. So yeah, this is the cool feature. So that's the change that I want to make. Not very cool, but it will do. So now if you follow these steps, git status will show you what you've changed. So see, it says modified source app.js, and you're on the branch cool feature. So that's a good way to check if you're on the right branch. I've configured my terminal to show me what branch it's on because I've made that mistake before, so just to keep myself sane. And then git add, I'm going to add everything because I've only changed one file anyways. And then git commit, what should the message be? Anyone just throw me anything.
Smelly Kelly.
Sure thing. And then git push. So because this branch that I've just created has only been created in my my origin, I want to push it to my, wait, I'm using the wrong words. So I've created a branch locally and I want to push it to what's been set as my upstream, which is the origin. So git push, this wouldn't automatically come up if you try to run git push. So git push, set upstream origin, cool feature. And now if I check, so this is the repository that I'm working on. You can see here that I've just pushed that less than a minute ago, cool feature branch. So I can do a compare and pull request here. So I'm asking to put all of my changes from the cool feature branch into the master branch. And then normally what's good practice is to lead something descriptive in here. So change text, change tag p tags to h1 tags, for example, and then create the pull request. So now that's sitting there. I kind of want to mimic what's happened here. I want to pretend like someone's done a coolest feature branch and they've merged it into master before you have. So if I go back to master, you can see that everything's still what it was. So it still says hello world. So now let's say the coolest feature person wants just to add a p tag saying coolest feature. And I'm just going to do the same thing.
Can you run on top of git status? There's another command that I find very interesting, which is git diff.
Git diff. Oh yeah, that's true. Okay. Let me just reset everything. Okay, so like Ricardo said, if you run git diff, which was in one of the next slides, you can see in your terminal what changes you've made to which files. So here in the app.js, I've deleted this line and I've added this line. So it's the same as when you're making a pull request and you see what you've changed in the red, what you've deleted in the red and what you've added in the green. It might be useful because you might do this before making the pull request. So if I quit by pressing Q and then add everything, commit it, coolest feature commit. So this is the person that's on the coolest feature branch. So now if we go back on our branch, cool feature, and we look at our pull request, you see that now that someone's made that change into master, before you've merged into master, you have conflicts in your file, or whatever conflicts there are. So basically this is the part where your branch is out of date. So to fix this, you can either do it manually here in GitHub, which I find a bit more confusing. So I'd rather do it here. So I git check out master again, sorry. No. I'll go back, ignore me. And then git merge master. What you would have done before, because I've directly put the changes into master, you'd pull inside your master first and then merge the changes into your branch. But since for the purpose of the demo, I've just done it this way. So git merge master. So now you can see there's a conflict here. So these are the changes that I want to make. And this is the change that's currently inside the master. So depending what you're trying to do, I'm trying to have both here. I'm trying to have the header as this is a cool feature and also keep whoever's changes in here. So this bit looks a bit complicated, but I'm just going to delete some stuff. So now I want to keep this my change and whoever's change that is. So now that I've merged the conflicts, oh no. Normally I do a message like fix conflicts.
So you edit them manually, you don't choose the options of...
You can if you want to. Normally, it's hard to say, because in this instance, I wanted both changes, but in your case, sometimes you just want to override what's happened inside master for some reason, so you'd click whichever one you want to keep. So yeah, for this case, I'm just going to keep both of them. So I'm going to get pushed to my cool feature branch. And now if I go back to that pull request, refresh it. So now this branch has no conflicts with the base branch. So we're okay now, we can merge into master. So let's just do that quickly. And normally you'd ask someone to review, and it depends on the company because their protocol may be that the other person, the reviewer, will merge your pull request, or they'll just approve it and you can merge it yourself. So just keep that in mind. So now that's all into my master. And it's good to also delete branches that you're no longer using, because they can pile up after a long time and you just have stale branches. So we might as well just go and delete that branch. So now the only active branches are master. So that's good. We want to keep it nice and clean. So now if we go back, these were the main ones that we just used. And now we've just done this one, so I'm just going to skip this slide as well. So this is what you might use. If you're checking past commits, you'll run git log. If you're reverting commits, you do git revert and then the commit hash. And what that means is the unique kind of ID that GitHub or Git has given it. So if you do git checkout into the master, and we want to see the past commits, so we do git log. And these are all the past commits that we've made on this repository. So you can see my initial commit, coolest feature commit, all of that stuff. So this would be the hash. If you wanted to revert this commit, you'd run git revert and then paste this hash. So there's other ways that you can use to revert your version. It depends on what you want, but normally I refer back to this cheat sheet that someone gave me when I was working. It's really good to just like refer back to it, get used to what it is, but depending on what you're trying to do. So for example, create, you got this, got these commands, if you can even see them. So git init, local changes, git status, git diff, git add. So there's all of this stuff. So I'll send this later, but it's good to play around with it. And now, what's the difference between Git and GitHub, which is what I was wondering when I first started. So Git is a revision control system, so it's a tool to manage your source code history, and GitHub is a hosting service for Git repositories. So they're not the same thing. Git is a tool and GitHub is a service for projects that use Git. So now, what version am I on? Every commit you make is a record of each change you've made. So if something goes wrong, you can revert back to a working version, which is a previous commit, and making small commits as you go along makes it easier to debug. So if you commit a bunch of different things at once, like changes to a header, changes to a nav bar and a button, you might not know what's causing the issue at first. So what might be useful if they're different commits and then you revert them one by one, you might see, oh, it was working at this stage, so it must have been the button. So yeah, it's always good to do that. So and last note, commit often. Keep your commits relative to one change, i.e. change styling for header, fix indentation, rather all in one with an and. If the rule of thumb that I was given was that if you have an and in your commit message, you should split it into 2 commits. And also experiment and mess up now rather than later on someone's source code.
Can I ask you one question regarding the previous?
Mm-hmm.
Should we also make for each small commit a pull request, or we can do a lot of small commits, but then one pull request that has, what would you suggest?
It depends on what you're trying to do. So if an example I can give to you is for our team app, so Alpha's team app, we've sorted our issues. So we've broken down everything into like smaller tasks of what we need to do to build the project. And so if your changes are related to that one issue, you'd make those commits and create a pull request for that specific change, so for that issue. So normally what I did when I was working was I'd refer to that issue, put that issue inside my pull request and say, this is the issue that's related to all my changes here. So yeah, it really depends on what you're trying to do. You might just need one line of code to fix or change something, and that would be one commit and one pull request. But mostly it would be like quite a few commits related to one issue in one pull request. Any more questions? I can't find the slides.
Would you explain the difference again?
Mm-hmm.
To make it clear.
Yeah.
Git and GitHub.
So Git is so all the commands that you're running, like git push, git status and all of that stuff, you're checking what's been happening in your project, and GitHub is helping you put that project somewhere. Yeah, so it's like holding your project for you. So it's comparing, Git will allow you to like compare your local and the one on GitHub and do things to them, if that makes sense. That's all right. Anything else?
Are you going to share the presentation?
Yeah, I can do.
I want to add some quick notes. Thank you, Kelly. Well, Git, that's the main source of problems in the long term, right? Probably you've started to smell that. Yeah, working with people is sometimes complicated, not only because of the human factor, but because of the technical issue, right? Don't forget that Git was a huge step ahead. Does anyone know who created Git? Who? Linus Torvalds, correct. The Linux Foundation, right? Linux is the biggest open source project in the world. If you go to github.com/blah blah blah Linux, you'll see they have like 700,000 commits, something like that. It's a huge project, right? Obviously, they were the first to realize that before Git, it was very difficult to work. They have, I think, more than 2,000 developers, a lot of people, yeah? So before Git, we got things like, well, I'm not even going to explain this, but I remember when I started coding in 2002, the way you collaborate is with a diskette. You know diskette? Yeah? You copy your code into a diskette, you share it with Bilal, and then Bilal had to compare manually file with file. That was horrible, right? So the thing with Git is a huge step ahead. It's fantastic. However, obviously, in some cases, it's very complicated, right? So we should try to avoid conflicts. That's the main key. Git is fantastic when everything works smoothly, but whenever there's a conflict, it's sometimes complicated, right? The example that Kelly showed was very good. Yeah, we both have changed the same file, the same line, and now we need to decide which version is the correct one. This is the most controversial and complicated scenario. Kelly also showed that we can merge conflicts directly on GitHub. I agree with her. Even though that's technically speaking correct, don't do that. Don't do that. Why? Every time you solve a conflict, you are likely to break your project. Yeah? Why? Because just by accident, if you mess around with any of the lines, you'll break your repo. Yeah? What's the point of fixing conflicts locally? You fix it, and then you do npm start, and you can see if the application still works or not, right? If you do that on GitHub, you don't know. You're blind, and probably you ruin it. Yeah? So how do we minimize the number of conflicts? There is nothing, or at least I don't know any secret, but obviously there are some guidelines. First of all, try to keep your files, the smaller the better. That's fundamental. That's the most fundamental rule, not only about Git, but about coding. Why? I'll give you two examples. Scenario number one. All our components, React components, are on a file called app.js. Yeah? That means that we are all working on the same project, and we are all touching the same file. It's likely to conflict. Yeah? It's likely to, not only because we are changing the same line. What happens if my first component is gallery.js, but I decide to move the component to the bottom of the file? We have a conflict already, right? So the files, the smaller the better. That's the first rule of thumb. The second one is commits, try to commit as much as possible. Yeah, as much as possible. The more often you create a pull request, the less likely you are to break the code, right? Some companies, they have a rule that said, if a branch has been alive for more than 30 days, delete it. That branch is invalid. Whatever you've done there, that's invalid. Why? Because if you created a branch 1 month ago, so many people has been contributing to the master that branch is likely to break everything. Yeah. So branches should be short-lived. You should create them, do something minimal, and then do the pull request. So the life cycle should be the shorter the better. Yeah, and that will hopefully help to minimize the number of conflicts, right? Conflicts we can have, well, the one Kelly showed, right? Two people manage to change the same line. What do? We need to do a manual visual review, right? One option could be valid, could be the other one, both, I don't know. To me, the most complicated scenario, because you got a conflict, when we did the git diff, we clearly show before and after, right? And if you got a conflict, you see side by side, it's boring, it's painful, it's dangerous, but at least you can deal with that. To me, the main issue with conflicts is, I'll give you another example. Back to the app.js, right? So I'm working on app.js, which is a 300-line file, and at the same time, Farad said, "Oh, that file is huge. Let's refactor it. So let's create a gallery.js. Let's create a show.js. Let's create a deepweb.js, whatever." Right? It's splitting the functionality, the logic of that file into smaller components, which is fantastic. From a refactoring point of view, he's doing great. However, I'm still changing my gallery component, which is as part of app.js, and he's changing a gallery component that is part of gallery.js. You see the point? We are both changing the same component, but I'm changing the component in a file, app.js, and he's changing the component in a different file, gallery.js. To me, this is the most complicated scenario to handle, because Visual Studio is not going to help you that easily. It will tell you, there is a conflict, because you are changing some code that doesn't exist anymore, because Farage moved it. Yeah? So you should be particularly careful when talking about refactoring, not when talking about adding new functionality, but when talking about creating new files, moving folders, all these things. Very, 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 very careful. Yeah, Git got much better over the last years dealing with conflicts, but that particular scenario is still controversial. Git is not going to tell you, "Hey, you changed that line of that component. In reality, now it belongs to that line of that component. Do you want to compare them in a sexy way?" No, this is not going to happen. Not at least in 2019, right? So again, try to avoid these scenarios, right? Generally speaking, if you have to face a refactoring task in a real company, what I used to do is I used to alert my colleagues. Like, you are working on your stuff, fantastic. I believe we should refactor that, but we should all be careful, because as soon as I start working on that task, we shouldn't touch the code base that much. So we need to, first of all, inform our colleagues, and then agree that this is a good task, and now is the right time to deal with that particular action, right?
So one good way would be to componentize as soon as possible.
Well, that's the point. The files, the smaller the better, right? If you create a new project and from the very first day you have small files, fantastic. But even if you try to look after the quality of your code, that may not be the case all the time. For instance, I can give you the example of Codery. At Codery, I have a rule. All the files should have less than 100 lines. Okay? That's my rule. If a file goes beyond 100 lines, I need to refactor it before even it goes to GitHub. Yeah? But that's not always the case. Unfortunately, because of whatever reason, I have a couple of files with 300 lines, which is horrible. Yeah? Which is horrible. So, because I'm working with Codery by myself, so I'm not going to conflict with anyone else. But in a real life scenario, you may have problems, because that's a file where everyone is working at, right? So we should be extra careful, just to let you know. And yeah, and there are some really good books about Git out there. Some of them have 500, 600 pages, and that gives you the idea that Git can be very complicated. But you know, it's part of our DNA. A company is not going to ask you, "Do you know Git?" Because today, in 2018, they assume that you know Git, right? At least the basics, but you should know that already. Anything else for Kelly?
That's all.
No?
I might show something after it's finished recording, though, because I don't think I can show it when it's recording.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Kelly. Well,
Where's the...